what are the major pinnacles of your survival that you feel are the most important and really capture you're against all odds? I survived.
Well, the odds as it were, and I feel even right now as we sit, I start to have goosebumps actually. From the very point I was born, my I believe that I was a miracle because born in a village with no obviously medical attention. People from all walks of lives. So I didn't want to restrict it to just my people only. It's just for everyone. But I'm grateful for this platform today because I'm very reserved in my life. I don't really have so many friends from my from Umthwakazi or from I'm grateful for this platform today to come here and be with yourselves. Probably I will just introduce myself if I may. My name is Fikelephi Jackson and I'm an author, I'm a mentor and I'm a speaker. Now I'm also happily married for so many years to my wonderful husband Colin Jackson. Together we have 7 children why am I doing what I'm doing? Oh my goodness. Briefly, obviously, I've written a book, Against All Odds. Against All Odds is just a book that carries a message of hope, restoration, forgiveness, and redemption. The book carries all those things, but it also exposes throughout different parts of my life challenges, hurdles, or odds as you might call them, and it hopefully as people go through the pages of my book they pick something up that would help them. I believe it's a book that people would cry with me, then they laugh with me, and then they get angry again, or they get, oh no she can't die, no she's alive. But the ultimate greatest news is that I'm here against all odds. I'm still here spreading this message of hope and restoration and forgiveness. So
this is very interesting, and thank you very much for sort of giving us a brief synopsis of your circumstances. So you've gone through the trials and tribulations of life from childhood, I suppose, up to the present time. But probably the best thing is to sort of still try and, if you could give us a brief summary of your childhood upbringing. I know it's contained in the book, but just to get the essentials of it. Who are you in terms of your childhood upbringing, and what can you share with?
Oh goodness me! Without giving away everything, because obviously I want the people to read the book and to find out more facts. I was obviously born out of, I was the 7th child from my mum. I learned later on, obviously in my life, that when my mother was 7 months pregnant, expecting myself, my father, who had been in prison for political reasons, passed away. He died as a result of bleeding internal because of the torture that he would have gone through. Now, from birth, I feel that I don't know what went through my mother's mind or thoughts as she brought me to the world, whereby she didn't have anything. She was a widow. She had just lost her husband. And being married now, it's a thought that I will not even try and entertain or think what if it happened to me. I can imagine. I can't imagine the pain my mother was going through. And my mother back then was not a working wife, because my father apparently was the breadwinner. My father worked very hard, and he made sure that my mother was fully provided for, together with my siblings. So there was my mom with a baby, Fikelephi, with nothing to give to this baby, no savings. I don't know how things were back then, but it was in a very simple village where I was
Was that
born.
in the 60s or in the 70s?
It's in the 60s.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the 60s. Yeah, the early 60s.
All right.
Yeah.
I would like you to maybe think a little bit about positive experiences when you were a child. Can you think of anything?
Well, the positive things that I could probably bring out of my childhood is my grandmother. She was a great woman of God. I can't describe how she didn't have much to give me, but she had so much love. Each time I looked at her eyes when I was troubled or when I didn't know how things would plan out in my little world, and I looked at her, I had so much assurance. Her nurturing, her prayers towards me, her teaching, sometimes even though I used to think she was harsh, but I felt I had someone who loved me truly. So it didn't matter what happened out there in the village. When I come home, my memories are very, very, I was fond of my grandmother. She's really...
I've got a feeling that maybe your dad as well is someone who was inspirational to you. Can you share with us any memories of your dad? I know when you were born, your dad had already died.
Yes.
But I know you have heard stories about your dad.
Oh God, yes, yes. Actually, now you've said, in the book I mentioned the two, at that early part of my life, the two important people that I was keen to find out or to listen to was obviously my grandmother. But as I grew up, I was very keen to know where he was, where my father was. But when my grandmother sat me down and told me, and obviously they explained, and my mother as well told me what happened, I began to think, wow, what a man. He actually gave up, left his wife with his children to go and pursue, to try and bring about freedom for other people. For me, that really kind of touched something on the inside of me. My sadness was that, well, he didn't finish what he started. Hence, I became very keen to take over, to try and pick up the baton from where he left, to try and help him complete this fight for freedom.
Yeah, okay. Which is very, very interesting and very motivational aspect of your being, basically. But why against all odds? I know you've mentioned some certain circumstances already that you've sort of alluded to, but you've written this book and you've sort of entitled it against all odds. Why this article? Why this title? Sorry, and you survived. So, what are the major pinnacles of your survival that you feel are the most important and really capture you're against all odds? I survived.
Well, the odds as it were, and I feel even right now as we sit, I start to have goosebumps actually. From the very point I was born, I believe that I was a miracle, because born in a village with no obviously medical attention or God knows what. My uncle's wife, my grandmother became midwives. For me, that alone, my arrival, just like that, is a miracle on its own. Now, as I mentioned in the book, being left with my grandmother, who was very old, by the way. She wasn't like a young person. She was old. When I say old, I mean wrinkles, really. Anything could have happened to me. Anything could have happened to me in that village. That's my birth. The second part that I believe anything could have happened, when I made a decision to follow into my father's footsteps. Again, when you read the book, you will know that anything could have happened in that bush, and no one would ever even know that once upon a time there was a little girl, her name was Fikelephi, and now she's no more. Nobody will ever know what would have happened to me. So for me, the odds in that journey of the war side of things were just looking back. I know that it's a miracle that I went and came back alive. But if you want me to fast forward, obviously after the war, because there is before, during and after. Now after the war, the biggest odds to start with was to just even prevail, for goodness sake, because you are coming back, the war is over, and you would think that there is a particular space that says, oh, Fikelephi, this is your little corner here. Even that, I had to fight.
We're at the point where you're talking about, trying to find your space and trying to sort of find a particular route that you could take post-war, which I assume was sort of an educational route, I guess.
Yes.
And how was that against all odds?
Well, you come back. Obviously, you are now kind of a little bit grown up, obviously, compared to the Fikelephi that went to the war. My mother then was in the city of Bulawayo, and where she lived was we had just one room, and in that one room was all the 9 of us. So there's no kitchen, there's no bedroom, there's no. So when you dress up, you have to tell your brothers, "Can you close your eyes, please? Because I need to put on my uniform or put on my whatever." So it's that. I don't want to go into it politically and say the housing, it's the, it's the whole economically in every aspect of it. But to me, the answer was education. But I knew my mother could not afford to obviously pay for the fees. But I against all odds afford to get the scholarship from the United Nations, and thankfully I was successful in that, and I managed to go to one of the best boarding schools.
Because in your book, one of the most prominent things is the domestic violence.
That's right.
That was perpetrated against you.
That's right.
I don't know whether I'm alright to say your husband, your ex-husband, or your partner.
No, that's just it. We never got married, and he actually, by culture or by tradition, he did not do the lobola process, and because of that, in my parents' eyes, he can never be called my husband. Unless if he had paid the lobola, then we would have talking a different story.
I realized that was one of the most difficult parts of your life. Maybe if you don't mind, could you just share with us how you managed to survive?
Now, this is a very taboo subject. I'm learning now that even in the Western world, the book does really touches deeply on domestic violence. Now, naive as I was concerning the opposite sex, I regrettably, obviously I say that in the book, I could have handled things differently. The father of my children was, looking back, probably needed help more than ever. Like all the perpetrators, I'm learning now, it's almost as if there's a pattern. Because as I go speak to women who are going through domestic violence as we speak, I find that the patterns are more or less the same. So in that experience, I went through a lot of isolation. I had fewer and fewer friends because the father of my children didn't trust me to have so many people close to me, as it were. Movements monitored, and just trying to raise up children in a hostile environment was alone the biggest odd, because it's a domestic violence. My findings is that it carried a lot of stigma. There was a stigma attached to it. I found that my self-esteem was, as a woman, not that it was obviously ever there, because as you read the book, you find that throughout I'm just fighting to just survive and be somewhere, be someone. It's almost as if for me this was the last thing to actually finish my little life that I was now starting to build up. It wasn't just the beatings. The father of my children was abusive physically, emotionally, sexually, because people, again, it's another taboo. It's almost as if women are objects. They ought to do what they're supposed to do when they are told to do. And I don't think life and I don't think love is anything to do with that. It's so that's a very, very most painful, probably, part of my life, which the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now, to help other people who are affected by this crime.
It's incredible, actually, that you've had to come through out of this in good shape, even though, you've had some difficulties, extraordinary difficulties. But, having gone through the toughest of circumstances, where you had that 10-day walk across to go to the other side of the country where you're coming from, and having gone through 3 years, I suppose, of military intensive training, which means you saw so much that was happening, friends dying, colleagues dying. Like in one aspect I was reading where you're saying, how you learned about life being so precious because you could see someone in the morning, and then all of a sudden in the afternoon they develop something and then they won't even. Now I began to think, okay, your coping style and your coping mechanism, that you could have been toughened up by that situation rather than weakened up by that situation. And then I move on to the post-war situation.
Yes.
And then I discover that you're so fragile.
Oh, yes. Oh, it's amazing, isn't it? First of all, you said something that I've come out stronger. But back then, I was bitter. I was very, very bitter because, remember, to me, the people that killed my father, they beat him up and they hurt my dad, and because of them I didn't have my father. So it's a little girl who's carrying all these things in her. One, I was very bitter, I was very, very upset. Two, having the father of my children doing what he did to me, I became more bitter. But then at the same time, there was this little child inside me that just wanted to be loved and to be cherished, to be actually told, you know what, you are actually somebody. But instead, the continuation of you are nothing, these are the things I grew up hearing. Look at you, you are ugly, you are nothing, you will never amount to anything. You see, if you keep hearing something over and over again, no matter how strong you are, over a period of time, you start to believe that what's being said. And as you believe that, then you weaken, and before you know it, you are right in the bottom of the bottom, where you can't even, the voice can't even come out to say, somebody help me, especially where there is nobody to help. Okay. So, yeah.
I understand.
Let's say maybe someone out there is in an experience or in a relationship, abusive relationship right now. What word of advice would you give a person in that situation?
Oh my goodness. First of all, whoever they are, whether you are a man or a woman, you are important. One, you are not a mistake. No one has a right to do things to you that they're not supposed to. You deserve all the respect from other people. Hopefully you give other people respect. Now, what do you do in this situation? It's a fine line. My questions will be, are you married? Or is this, like in my case, the father of my children? Is the abuse, if it's physical, there's danger there, please seek help as quickly as you can. There is somebody somewhere who can listen to you. And if you are in this country, it's much easier now. There's helpline, there's refuge. If you go on my website, there is other help that is available out there. I would say seek help urgently, most urgently. Why have I said that? Because in my case, had I not come out of the abusive situation I was on, I wouldn't be here sat with yourself, because the woman after me, when you read my book, she didn't survive it. She died. Now, but if it's a situation where probably it's verbal, I'm not sure. It's a fine line. Do you have somebody mentoring or speaking to you? Do you have, there's lots of avenues where people can speak. But if it's a situation of actually abuse that you read about in the book, seek help very urgently.
Okay. I mean, that's a very, very, I must appreciate, that's a very powerful sort of feminist perspective of abuse by the other party. Have you had any experiences of the other way around? And could you have in your book balanced the perspective of you know, the male being the abuser all the time, rather than, okay, it could be the other way around, and there's some people who are really suffering, who are males there, who are actually suffering huge amounts of abuse from don't you think then that this kind of like sort of doesn't give it a balanced view of the real world out there, that there are people who are really abused by females to a greater extent and who are suffering out there? Does it not sort of present this perspective of a feminist a sort of feminist chauvinist attitude towards males, rather than sort of a balance?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. Against All Odds are survived. It's a book that's about an individual who has stated the truths as they were. So in this case, even if I was a man, if it was the other way around, I would still have written a book, Against All Odds, I Survived as a Man. This is what the beauty is about Against All Odds. In my speaking engagements, I meet a lot with men, and believe it or not, I'm learning now that men do go through it. But through reading Against All Odds, they found that the same symptoms, the same pattern that I went through, they go through themselves. So they found that the book probably is one of the few books that would give you a way out in terms of because in it I do deal with forgiveness as well. Now, if there's any men out there who are going through this abuse, please absolutely seek help most urgently, because as I keep repeating, my findings is that the perpetrators themselves, if now learning what I'm learning now, is that in most cases, most of them were either abused themselves when they were growing up. There is another lots of can of worms. So obviously, if you are a man and you are being abused, that person is very disturbed, the woman in your life, and it's not something that probably you qualify to try and tackle, because in my case, there were many a times that I thought, okay, today I'll make sure I clean up, I do everything, so that when the father of my children come in, I'll be able to say, look, you know, there is a way that we can talk about this. There is your food is there, everything is all right, things are all in place, but none of those things work, because what you are dealing with is someone who's got my findings is that the actual abuser, beneath that, what's happening is just the symptoms of their bottom line problem. I don't know if I'm saying
maybe
it's making
psychological
sense.
problems.
Yes. So for yourself, for me back then, I'm only Fikelephi, who's just got the post-war
Problems.
happenings. Yes. So I do not qualify to actually go through any counseling with this individual and say, look, you don't do it this way. Maybe you need to address your issues yourself. So the same principle applied to the men. Please, men out there, as you read against all odds is not feminine in whatever art or form.
Just one more before I go on to that, Makala. There's a feeling in me when I read the book, that there's a sense of doubt at the beginning, even if you meet Suli. There's that sense of doubt. So what I'm left with is whether that doubt, is pervasive throughout the relationship. You're sort of there and not there. You sort of because at the beginning there's that sense of doubt. Even
do you know where the doubt comes from? I guess again.
I wouldn't say you were 100%. I wouldn't say you were 100% involved with him.
No,
because from the beginning you're
just
as I read it, I feel you were very guarded, and I feel guarded as well. As I go through your emotions and your feelings, and there's this sense of guardedness. You know, the time he takes you with the uncle, you're guarded. The time you meet him, the other friends influencing you, but you're not there. You're not in there that you really were into Suli. So then at the end of the day, I'm thinking, but she wasn't there at all.
No. That's the whole tragedy of the whole thing. I thank God that I am one of those survivors who've actually been restored. Looking back now, I'm happily married to my husband. Now, it took me 4 years to get to know my husband. Now, when you read my book, you realize that I did not know Suli at all. That's the bottom line. And remember that I was a timid little girl from the village to war, and now back in this city, and I didn't have a father figure, so the opposite sex for me wasn't always a straight cut off thing to say, oh yeah, I'm comfortable around this other person. It had to take time to get to know me, or to get to know the other person, before I could actually be comfortable as I'm comfortable with my husband.
But you see, at the end of it, I don't feel that the interplay of your interactions with him, of your relationship with him, was kind of like there was that holding back. So my question is, were you ever relaxed with this person? Or there was that sense that, and how did this play into the relationship at all? And maybe, I'm probably being an advocate, a devil's advocate, and maybe he did, because there is this bit that you can transfer, the psychology transference issue, that if the way you feel towards someone, you can transfer it to them, and they can transfer it back to you, and there might have been a feeling that yes, she's not really part of me, she's still very skeptical of me, and of course,
out of his insecurity, then was this idea of trying to capture you, because you never wholeheartedly went in there.
Yeah.
So you always one foot there, and
Yeah.
I wasn't really, I was doing this as a trial.
Yeah.
And other girls were, saying...
Can I just make something clear? Because again, this is a very, very delicate message out there. Now, whether timid or not timid, the bottom line is no human being has a right to beat up another human being for whatever reasons. That's, for me, that's the bottom line. So now, if ever there was any love, if I were rewind like you are, I would have said probably I needed to be taken out to dinner and just talk to me and find out what I like. What do I like? Do I like reading? Do I like, what are my dreams? What do I like? You know, what are my aspirations? Do you understand? So, but it was a militant kind, so none of that was. So obviously, because all the things that you might perceive as a relationship would be was the opposite of that. So obviously that put more and more guard on my side to say, oh my gosh, now what's going to happen? Now what's going to happen? Now what's going to happen? So I think I wanted to make that clear, that no human being, for whatever reasons, that's why I say sexually as well, because for whatever reasons, no human being has a right to force any individual, whether it's a man to a woman or the vice versa. If a person says no, a no is no. Full stop.
All right. I'm aware that the time is not on our side. However, I will allow this interview maybe to go for maybe a few more minutes.
Okay.
I think let us move a little bit forward.
Okay.
We have spoken about the very painful subject of domestic violence, and you have really explained clearly to us. Before we move forward, could I just ask one small question? This man, to me, he looks like he's a monster, solely. He's a monster. Are there any good attributes of this man? Does he have any good side of him?
Wow. Do you know what? The other side of Suli was, to me, at the time, I feel that he loved his children. So, whether or not, it's again a fine line. How he demonstrated that, in spite of everything else that happens with his different wives or stepmothers that came along, my understanding as I hear stories is that in some cases these women were beaten up because they didn't treat the children right. But then again, it's none of the excuses, as I said before. No human being has a right. It's wrong, it's a crime, and it's wrong. So now, how true is that? Suli, in the other side, there were moments I thought, wow, probably when you remove all this other thing that comes out, probably this is beneath that. There is a person who could actually be a very remarkable man and be who God put him on earth to be.
I realized that it was around 1980s and he was already driving. What was he doing in life?
Job-wise, actually, he's one of those people who had made it. He used to work for this big reputable company and he was a supervisor there. Yeah, but then because of, he was obviously, he used to drink a lot and smoke a lot. So, in terms of direction in that, it's probably all those things interfere. And there's the going out with friends. He still had obviously had a lot of attachments with these friends. Yeah, in his sober mood, he would say, well, we should buy a house, sort things out. And obviously, eventually, I bought the house for my children. That's the same house where they lived until Suli passed away. and that house is still available for me to.
Okay. All right. Let's move forward now. You come to the UK. How was life like?
Right. UK.
Yeah.
I came, I guess, like all the other immigrants, when you leave your country to come to another country, especially in my case, you think you've escaped all the horrible bits, so the expectations probably might be so high. Obviously I thought, well, now I'm out of it, maybe I'll be, but obviously in my case, I'm not saying this is with everybody who immigrates. In my case, the nightmares continued, and I was obviously immensely, desperately missing my children. It was very difficult, as you read in the book, to manage or to run this relationship with my children. But against all odds, I made sure.
Bawo Thixo somandla uyintoni ubugwenxa bethu kantisenzele busweni lenkosi bawo Thixo somandla bawo emhlabeni uyintoni sibuthwele ubunzima sibuthwele ubunzima bawo Thixo somandla bawo emhlabeni sibuthwele ubunzima bawo Thixo somandla bawo emhlabeni sibuthwele ubunzima bawo Thixo somandla bawo
Emhlabeni